Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. Just want to thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Lee. I'm the trainer and tech support specialist with Blue Sky Bio, and just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to join us today. Like to begin by just doing a short intro on what we're going to be looking at in fabricating surgical guides. We'll get into more detail, but we're going to do an overview and hopefully disseminate some information to those who just getting started, as well as maybe throw a couple of tips to the more seasoned user of Blue Sky Plan. Lost the screen, just a moment. I'll get the screen share back up. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, first off, I just want to say again, thank you for attending. And as advertised, you're entitled to 6 free exports. All you have to do is just copy the long code line from the registration page and send it either to plan@blueskybio.com, or you can send it to me. I've placed put my name, contact information, email, phone number in the chat. Likewise, feel free to enter any questions that you might have inside the chat box. You send us the license and we'll reply as quickly as we can and get you started using the exports and fabricating guides. We also want to say welcome to new customers. We're offering $1,000 off of any starter kit, whether it's including a motor, not including a motor, 30 implants, 10 implants, etc. All you have to do is to claim your credit is to put in Cyber Monday STL attendee in the order form on the web. For anyone who is not a new customer, we'd like to thank you by taking $500 off of any $1,000 or more order. And again, any order that you place on the website, make sure that you put in Cyber Monday STL attendee, so you'll get the credit that you deserve. Just want to mention that the 6 free STLs are separate from either of these two offers. And what is Blue Sky Plan all about? It's a very advanced design program that allows not only treatment planning, but you can design various types of surgical guides, models, using our implant system or someone else's implant system, and guided kits. And what is Blue Sky Plan's objective? Well, first off, it can be used by the private practitioner who's going to streamline the software to their needs, as well as to any variation thereof of any lab or service center, anyone offering treatment planning services, restoration, etc., regardless of the size of the lab. Blue Sky Plan definitely fits in. Details about how we're going to lay out today's talk. First off, we're going to be dealing with the simplest form of Blue Sky Plan, namely normal mode. and that occurs when you can use that to its fullest benefit when you're using Blue Sky Bio parts. Excuse me. If you're using additional guided kits, then you'd be using advanced mode, and we'll talk about how to design a guide using someone else's or any additional surgical kit. Any modifications that have to be made within the software, they're simple modifications, only a few of them, and we'll discuss those in more in detail. Another thing we're going to discuss today is dealing with scans, and you'll see why as we cover more ground, that the situations when there's a lot of noise in the CT, a lot of metal in the mouth, the scatter is obliterating the CT scan. How do we align models in a situation like that? We'll discuss that in detail. Along the way, what we'll do is throw in any new tidbits relating to the newest versions of the software and any additions that we have. Yep. Yep. Please mute the mics, please. If you can mute the mic, that would be great. Thank you. Yeah, any new features in the software we'll be adding and talking about as they pop up during the course. Now, the first thing we mentioned is about using normal mode when you're using Blue Sky Bio parts. What does it mean, Blue Sky Bio parts? So we've divided it into 3 sections. Obviously, implants, the drill system. Our drills are an integral part of the definition of Blue Sky Bio parts. One cut drills where the initial osteotomy is the final osteotomy. Only drill once. They're specially designed. They've been acclaimed. There's a lot of write-ups about it, and all good. The other thing is the handpiece, and we'll see later on that using the handpiece, while it's not mandatory as the other two, but it does make life a lot simpler, and looking at the price, it's definitely cost effective. So now we're going to get into using Blue Sky Plan under normal mode, and we get into normal mode by looking at the mode menu on the software itself, or when the software starts, there'll be a screen that you can select your mode and which guide you'd like to create. So for our purposes, we're dealing right now with normal mode, and only going to be discussing digitally designed surgical guides. The beauty of normal mode is that it's simplistic in nature. There's no really no numbers, no adjustments that have to be made or tweaking within the software. The guide panel that we see on the right will be, as you see, straightforward. All we do is click the button, perform the activity, and go on to the next. And in just a matter of a few steps, the surgical guide will be created when we get to that part of the process. Exactly what's needed, we'll get into more detail here on this slide. Obviously, like using the software, you need your DICOM images, so you need a CT scan. You'll also need an optical scan of the patient's soft tissue model. The handpiece, the X-Cube handpiece, which again fits any e-motor system, e-motor compatible. The handpiece is preferable. It's not going to break the situation, but it does make life a little bit easier. The drills, of course, are BioCut drills are mandatory to work within normal mode. When we start, what we need to do is to get our images up and running, and we do that by going to the File menu, clicking on New Project. That'll open up our locator for our DICOMs, and there are help functions built in that we can simply click to help navigate to find our DICOM images. Once they're loaded up, we're ready to treatment plan. Treatment planning can be done in one of several ways, either starting with dropping off in the implants initially and then following up with the crown, or simply start with the teeth. And whether you want crowns without crowns, you can tie in the implants by going to the bottom right, clicking on implant. You'll go to the implant screen, pick up your implant, and the implant and the tooth, whether with roots or without, will be allowed you to line up as one unit, and just make treatment planning a lot easier. We've added some new features here. One of them is adding multiple teeth in one clip. You can just highlight over the teeth that you want to add and bring them onto your image. Where you set your cursor will be where the dark tooth will be positioned, and the other teeth will follow adjacently. We can also set the size of our teeth, fixed to small, medium, and large, or in the 3D view, you have complete control over it by grabbing part of the widget and resizing as needed. Another new function to help with treatment planning is to be able to position a patient's photograph. If you see the icon structure on the right side, that's taken from the right side, kind of enlarged, of the 3D view. The fourth icon down will allow you to import a photo and position it and change its opacity so it suits your purposes. So we've imported our DICOMs, we've treatment planned, and now we're ready to import a model. The model will serve as the soft tissue base for which we'll be designing the surgical guide. Before actually bringing in the model and importing the STL model, what we're going to do is clean up the 3D view as best as possible by one of three ways. You can either use the slide bar at the bottom of the 3D screen and grab the handle, slide it over to the right to increase the threshold and reduce artifacts as such. It'll also help get a better edge on the occlusal edge of the teeth. If there happens to be more artifacts that can be handled by this, we would go to the Surfaces panel. Well, actually, any panel on the right side of the screen that you see can be opened by going to the Panels menu. It's the fifth menu icon from menu item heading from the upper left of the program. Go to Panels, and in the Surfaces panel itself, under Surface Culling, you have two items. You can click either or choose either Cut or excuse me, Cut or Isolate. Using the Cut function, what you would do is be supplied with a lasso that you'd be able to stretch around any particular object of any shape, and in doing so, it'll remove it. Isolate is a lot easier. All you have to do is click on a contiguous portion of the scan, and anything not connected, as you see here in the lower right, like the ramus and the remnants of the mandibular posterior teeth, they would just disappear. So that's with Isolate. Immediately following that, you would go to the Align page and or simply click in File menu and import STL model. and you'd be supplied with the alignment page, alignment window. As you see, a split screen, and one side would have the CT scan, the other would have the patient's model, and you'd be able to manipulate each of the images to position the way you'd need in order to select landmarks, holding the shift key down, and you'd be able to click on the specific portions of the tooth anatomy in order to line up the pairs between the model itself and the CT scan. Always a question of how many points do you need. We say 7 to 10. You can add more. Positioned, and they should be distributed all around the arch, and not to focus on one particular area, because it will be very possible that the other side will be uneven. If you're not satisfied with the merge, you can always go back to Model Manipulation Panel, do align by points, and pick maybe several more points, and maybe just be a little bit more diligent and exacting in the positioning. There's, of course, the manual method of positioning the model to line it up. It's a little bit more interactive, and you do that by within the Model Manipulation Panel. This time, click on Adjust Model Manually, and here's an image of the 3D view, but you can also use the some tools, rotational and dragging tool, to manipulate the models in the 2D view. In 3D, we've added more fine control using either the keyboard arrows, almost like pixel by pixel movement for fine motor control. Likewise, if you hold the Alt key down and use the arrows, you'll be able to get fine motor control for the rotational aspects. How do you know the merge is done satisfactorily? What you would do is you would go to the Surfaces panel. Again, we see it on the right, and you would click on the hint for the hint check mark. Make sure it's checked on the line for the exact model that we're using. What will happen is that you will see an outline in the cross sections and the axial view, and what you want to look for is that the model outline hint is hugging each of the teeth in the cross section, and of course the circumference of the teeth in the axial, and that as you scroll down, the axial view, in this case is it's a maxilla, so you scroll down and you want to see the occlusal face of the teeth disappear at the same time that the hint line disappears as you're scrolling in the axial. Once that's done, we're ready to actually fabricate the guide. Again, just to quickly review, we've imported our DICOMs, we've treatment planned, we've aligned our model to the CT scan. Now, before we're going to start fabricating, we just want to clean up our view so that it's just easier to work with. In the Surfaces panel, we just want to make sure only our model is showing. As you can see on the Surfaces panel, it was actually pulled out just for the purposes of demonstration. Normally, you would be on the right side of the complete screen. And you would just make sure that that model is checked and under visible, and that the CT scan that you see beneath it is not checked. Same thing in the implant list. We want to make sure our implant and abutments are not showing. So we uncheck those from their visible counterparts. Our guide panel is the next the next panel that we're going to go to, and you start off by drawing the curve. What you would do is position the model rotate as necessary and start drawing the curve by, as soon as you click draw curve, hold the shift key down, drag a line, as you see, around the gingiva, or wherever you want to limit the surgical guide to. And the goal here is to start drawing and continue drawing. Release the shift key if you have to rotate the view. You want to have a complete loop going around maybe the facial, going up to the or down to the occlusal, and come around on the palatal side and draw the curve as long as you want it. You just want a quadrant, you just want a couple of teeth. It's all up to you. Next, we would edit the curve by clicking Edit Curve, and you'll see in the screen that we'd have control points that would show up automatically, and we'd manipulate these control points to smooth out the edges, make sure there were no sharp corners, points. Likewise, you want to make sure none of the lines crisscross, because that would invalidate and produce an erroneous guide. When you're ready to continue, you click Create Guide, and the handpieces preferences shows up. Remember earlier what we mentioned is that the X-Cube handpiece does make life easier. It's not a deal breaker, so you don't have to have one. If you do have one, all you have to do here is click I'm using an X-Cube handpiece, and you continue. If you're not, then you just have to add in or modify the short and draw long drill lengths as they accommodate your handpiece, what the emergencies are on for these drills, and you'd be able to save them under Save New Settings, and they'll be available for you whenever you use the software. Again, we have that information. If you need have a particular handpiece, we'd be able to tell you what the emergencies are from the bottom of the handpiece to the tip of the drill. Pretty much within a minute or so, the guide is fabricated. We see it here directly on the model, and in the surfaces panel, we see the actual surgical guide surface is added within the surfaces area. Here the model has been removed. All we have is the actual finished surgical guide, and you can see clearly both views and detail, top view and the underneath surface as well. Our next point of reference would be to export the surgical guide. It would we're in normal mode, so there's no real interaction with the final workings of the program. And Blue Sky will say you click export. It will export the surgical guide as an STL to wherever, whatever folder or device you want it saved to. One thing about exporting, the software is free to treatment plan and use up to the point of this right here, exporting. You would be told that if you don't have any export licenses that you need to purchase, and you can do that directly in the software under the File menu, where it says File, Purchase, STL Exports. Report would be the next logical, getting a drill report. the next logical step, and it follows suit within the normal modes guide panel. And what we have is the software chooses the views that it would generate, where it can be saved or printed, and you'd also get a lot of information dealing with the parts that would be used for this particular situation. The metal cylinder that would be needed, the drill that would accommodate our one-cut or bio-cut drills, and also you have on the right side two separate depth functions. It would tell you what the drill length would be needed for our handpiece with our drill, and you see the 28.07 is from the top of the surgical guide drill stop extension that you see down to the bottom of the implant. The 23.7 figure is just calculated from the diameter, or I should say from the hole in the surgical guide, maybe a millimeter beyond, as we'll talk about later, the metal cylinder lip, down to the bottom of the implant. You would then order your parts, and you can just click the Order Parts button. You'll go to be taken directly to the website. All the parts that would be needed for the case will be automatically added. You can control that from the website itself by either changing quantity or deleting, and continue shopping, and add anything you might want to the cart as well. It's just a bigger view of the closer view, more enlarged, to see the details of the items that are being ordered. Okay, so in order to just to recap, several steps. Again, this is the flow that would normally be used regardless of the mode that you're in. You start off, collect the patient's DICOMs, your treatment plan, import the model, and just draw the curve around the model, edit and create. And of course, ancillary items, saving the surgical guide as an STL, the export function, ordering whatever is needed for the case, as well as generating reports that you need for your records. And once again, normal mode for the most part, really no calculations whatsoever. Again, in its pristine form, if you're using the X-Cube handpiece, then absolutely no modifications done to any numbers within the software. Post-production on the software, you can use the brush to smooth out any imperfections in the guide that you might find on the surface, and that will smooth out the surface. You don't want to inadvertently use the underside and remove any material, because that would affect the seat and the accuracy of the guide. You can apply a label to the patient identifier or whatever to the surgical guide, something that if you're doing multiple cases or if the lab is busy, the printing, this would emboss an identifier on the guide and assure that it doesn't get mixed in with something else. You can also change the drill stop orientation. That's what we have here in the view as the green projection coming off of the guide hole representation, which is the brown or yellowish, dark yellow cylinder. And that's the inner aspect Well, that can be rotated. If you just go back, click on Change Drill Stop Orientation, you'll be able to rotate the opening in the drill stop so it can face whichever position is more comfortable for and reaching, gaining access to. Also on this slide, you see maybe the do and the don't. The view on the left shows that there is nothing interfering and impinging upon the inner diameter of the guide hole. This guide hole is where the metal cylinder will be seated. And you don't want to have a situation where it was planned such that maybe the implant was angling or making a situation where the guide hole is a little too far or too close to an adjacent tooth, where part of the tooth actually impedes into the inner, and you can see it on the left side. And that could and will be a problem. What will happen is that you snap in the surgical the cylinder or the master cylinder into the surgical guide, and it's going to hit the crown, and it won't seat. So again, we just put it here just to make you aware. To be careful about doing that. Now, you ready to print your guide? Who do you send it to? You can really send it to whoever you want. We recommend Digi3D Works and RC Mill, mainly because they specialize in printing. They're great to work with. They're very helpful. Do a great job. And in the case of DigiWorks 3D for 35 bucks, they will optically scan a model if you don't have a scanner yourself, and they will print the guide. There's been talk about the $50 or $60 surgical guide. Here, this is pretty much how we come to our numbers. We mentioned before the software is free to use. The only charge incurred on the software side of things is when you want to export. So to export, you can buy different bundles. Of course, the more bundles you buy, the cheaper the per case usage. And the average is about 15. Kind of the ranges from say 11 to 21. If you're doing a 2-implant case, you need 2 metal cylinders to be seated into the guide holes, and $6 a pop. We have 12. We mentioned one of our labs charged $35 to print, and the sum comes to $60. Okay, so we just finished talking about normal mode when we're dealing with Blue Sky Bio parts. Again, Blue Sky Bio parts means our drills and preferably the handpiece as well as the implants. Now we're in a situation where what happens if you're not using Blue Sky Bio parts necessarily? Maybe some, but you're using different drills, using a different surgical kit. Well, we've incorporated advanced mode, and that will allow a lot of interactivity, a lot of tweaking, gives you the capability to really control a lot of the software. To get to advanced mode, you just check the mode menu, click advanced, or if you're just starting the software up, it might show up asking you which mode you'd like. I want to take this opportunity to say viewing is not an option. Viewing is just more like a demo mode where nothing can be adjusted. So here you definitely want advanced, and you can see right away on the right side we have a screenshot of the guide panel, and it's much more detailed, has a lot more functionality, and we'll talk about that more in detail as we approach the guide panel discussion on fabrication. Uh, how much does this differ from a normal uh, guide mode, normal mode situation? Well, you still need your DICOM, so you need a CT scan, and you also need a scan or an STL of the stone model. The differences here is that we need some additional information. One is, what are the actual drill lengths of the drills you're using? Are they coming directly from the handpiece, or are there hardwired or hardened stops built in? Need to know that. Also need to know if you're using a key system, uh, the outer diameter of the spoon. Also the handle, if there's any, well, there should be a little bit of height sitting above the guide tube. You need to know that as well. And we're going to talk about that and illustrate that more in detail. Uh, so don't worry if you don't get it yet. We start out exactly the same way. We have to gather our DICOMs. And again, if anyone coming late, just want to reiterate, to open up your DICOMs, you go to the File menu, go to New Project, you get this screen, and you can use any of the help features up on top to pinpoint where the DICOMs might be located. You then treatment plan, and again, you can treatment plan either by throwing the implants in first or starting with crowns and doing those first. Our next step after importing the DICOMs, treatment planning, we have to get ready to import our model. It's important because the model will be what's going to be the base for our surgical guide, since you can't use a CT scan unless, of course, you're using a bone model. But the situation here is that we want to clean up the 3D view. We use a slider bar underneath the 3D view to kind of limit the density and be able to have a good rendition of the patient's anatomy. If that doesn't work, or there are parts in there that are too big to be removed, then you can use the surfaces panel like we did mentioned before in the normal mode. Go to the surfaces panel, use the cut or isolate function to remove either the cut would use a sort of a lasso tool that you would drag around an object, and you would remove it from the view. Isolate removes anything not connected to wherever you click. So if you click on an arch, the arch is contiguous. Anything else that's not touching would be removed, like in this case, patient's ramus and maybe two of the posterior mandibular teeth remnants. We would then actually go to the import function, which is found on the File menu. You import an STL. You get the alignment view, like you see, the split screen, where the CT and the patient model are shown, or scan of the patient model are shown, and you'd be able to manipulate the image, resize, redirect the positioning, to rotate, whatever, in order to get the positioning and the visibility needed so that you can use the shift, hold the shift key and click on to place matching point sets on the areas that you would need in order to stitch. Use a lot of points, 7 to 12, 7 to 15, and make sure they're not evenly placed, but that you're not focusing on one particular area more than others. As mentioned before, you can tweak even further by going into align by points, pick a new additional points, use more points, and try to match them a little bit more carefully on their landmarks. But there's always the way of doing it manually by clicking on Adjust Model Position manually under the Model Manipulation panel. And in the 3D, you get a widget, as you see here, where you'll be able to drag by the arrows, or you can rotate along the rings in any of the three directions. Or for really fine tuning and fine motor control, you can use the keyboard arrows up, down, left, or right for positioning the model. Or likewise, if you want to rotate, hold the Alt key down and rotate as necessary. And again, it was pretty near pixel by pixel for control. Confirm the merge the same way. See, a lot of the similarities are apparent. You look in your cross sections and your axial views, and make sure that the hint line, which is found under the surfaces for that particular model, make sure it's checked. You'll see the hint outline, as you can see, clearly see in the cross section, middle cross section view. You can see it hugging the shape of the teeth. Likewise in the axial, and you know you've got a good merge. Before we actually fabricate the guide, we just want to clean the screen up a little bit by just making sure the model is the only one showing on the surfaces, and that we don't have an implant or abutment in our way. So we click to check so they're out of the imagery. Now, if you remember, where there is some tweaking that's going to be necessary because we're not using parts in our database. This is the flexibility area where we've got to make two changes. One is to the guide hole diameter, and the other is to offset, which we'll see in the next screen. The guide hole diameter is the hole in the surgical guide to accommodate a particular tube. Depending on the tube that you would need, either based on the outer diameter of the keys that you want to slip in, or drills, whatever is going to be put in, what you would need to do is know the outer diameter of the tube and add 1/10 of a millimeter. So what's already shown here is a 4.5 millimeter guide hole that would be needed to accommodate a 4.4 outer diameter tube. Likewise, you see, say we look at the fourth line down, Nobel regular, tube 502, its outer diameter is 5.02 millimeters, and we add 1/10 of a millimeter, so we have 5.12, which is what we would put in the guide hole diameter if we were placing that particular cylinder. Now we have dozens of different sized cylinders, enough to virtually handle any surgical kit. Next thing we want to concern ourselves is the drill length. We want to make sure that wherever the handpiece or drill stop is going to stop, that it matches perfectly to whatever is going to do the stopping. So we want to make sure that the drill goes to length and not beyond. We have several facets. We have our total drill length, which is a combination of the implant length and the offset, which is just the distance between the top of the implant to the top of the guide hole in the surgical guide, and then a guide tube Most of our guide tubes have a 1 millimeter lip, which would show above the top of the guide hole on the surgical guide. And if you have any other devices you're putting into the guide tube, like a key system, uh, and that might have maybe a millimeter lip on top. So that would sit even higher, and that would be what would stop either the drill stop or the handpiece. Uh, so offset is the only variable that we can change, and the offset will be equal to the total drill length minus the implant height minus the any ellipse, 1 millimeter for the metal tube, the guide tube, anything else for a spoon or a key system. The offset that you calculate is what you would put down under the guide tube under offset. We're now ready to create the guide. So again, to review the steps, they're all the same. Import the DICOM's treatment plan, align the model, import and align the model, and ready to fabricate. So our guide panel is quite advanced, hence advanced mode. There's a lot that we can control specifically. You want to make sure you're going to be fabricating your surgical guide on the correct model. So if there are multiple models, choose the correct one from the drop-down. You want to lock your implants and teeth just to make sure that nothing moves, even intentionally. We have access to drill stop posts. Mentioned earlier that in the normal mode, the drill stop posts are created automatically. Here we want to make sure that they're off because they're not part and parcel and really should only be used for Blue Sky Bio drills and not under the circumstances that we're dealing with. So make sure they're unchecked in advanced mode when you're using for different surgical kits. We didn't talk about this particular brush function, but there is a function in the normal mode that will make sure, and well, both modes will have it. In advanced mode, you can control it, and it will create a platform so that there is nothing interfering for a certain diameter from the center of the implant axis line. That will there will be nothing higher than that guide hole platform that the handpiece could get stuck on. If a neighboring tooth was too close or the guide around that tooth was too much, the brush will remove that. And here you see it's already set to 15, but of course that is completely under your control. Next thing you want to do is make sure that the guide quality will be printed to the best standards that can be done depending on the printer itself. You see what the settings are for normal, high, and very high. Most printers can handle 50 microns, so high is good. They're getting better and better, so 20 micron is a good resolution. And again, assuming that the model has that much detail and the scan of it was that good. We're ready to draw our curve like we did before. You click on Draw Curve. You would hold the Shift key down and start drawing the curve around the area that you want to confine the surgical guide to. Release the Shift key. You could rotate and then continue drawing until you've come around from where you started and have a completely closed loop. You would edit your curve, again, just like before, and you would have access to the control points that you would manipulate in order to fine-tune the positioning, smooth out any rough edges, or make sure there's no crossed lines. In clicking Create Guide, we're brought up with our handpiece, and this could come into play, or in some cases it would just be irrelevant because we've done it manually. The guide is created. You can see it sitting on top of the model. And closer view, you can see that what was the brown tube or guide hole, you can see how flush it is with the surgical guide design, meaning it's perfect, right on. We have some functions that we mentioned before. The brush tool, where we want to smooth out the surface of the surgical guide, not the inside, because that will ruin the alignment and seating of the surgical guide. But here in advanced mode, advanced is more control, and we have control over the intensity of the amount of material we're going to remove by smoothing out and dragging our cursor over the surface. And yeah, if you need to rotate, you just release the shift, drag, rotate as needed, apply shift again, and continue smoothing out. Even our label design is more streamlined and more usable. Here, you would type in the text, and you can control the size of the text by controlling the size of the surgical guide. Increase the size of the surgical guide, the text will be smaller relative. You can position the surgical guide so that the text goes where you want, and there you see, after it's applied, what it looks like in the inset in the lower left. We're ready to export our well, literally anything, our surgical guide. However, in normal mode, you can export anything and everything that you saw in the 3D view, whether it's teeth, abutments, models, or the CT surfaces. You can even export the nerves. At this stage, you're ready to order your parts. Your parts comes up in the parts panel, and you can check or uncheck what you don't want to order. Go to Add Parts to Cart, and those parts that you've got checked will show up. And you can select or deselect as you need. We want a drill report. Drill report was the next thing down the list in normal. Same thing here. And screenshots can be added if you want to add more to the report, so more detail. And of course, you could save it as needed, or if you want to print or create a PDF, you'll get a detailed report setup. How do you want the report to look? Do you want to add comments to a header or footer section, as well as keeping or discarding the guide report, even though for this particular situation you would not need it, or in case it would just add some more confusion because the information over here doesn't apply. It only applies to Blue Sky Bio drills. as you see here in the red. It would not apply to other drill systems. For because it's important, wanted to reiterate this here as well, that make sure that when you're treatment planning, that there is nothing impeding on the inner circle or the inner diameter of the guide hole, because that's where the tube would go, and anything hitting there would hit once you try to put the guide in. I should say, guide in the patient. Printing, whether the same prices, same deals apply whether you produce the guide in normal mode or advanced, and price remains the same. Okay, so we've discussed two situations where we're using Blue Sky Bio drills and parts, or a case where we're just using a different surgical kit. What we're going to discuss now is a new technique, new protocol developed by Dr. Corey Glenn. He was kind enough to let us use his information from his YouTube video and presentation. And here, in a situation where you have a lot of metal, you anticipate a lot of metal in the mouth, it's best to examine the patient and decide maybe to go this route instead of having a situation where you've already scanned the patient and that you can't use the scan because you can't locate proper landmarks, corresponding landmarks to the model. Same thing with trying to check your merge. You can see the outlines of the model that you can't tell if they're correct or not because there's so much scatter in the scan. So one method to bypass this is by doing an impression, taking an impression. And again, this is a dentulous case, not edentulous, dentate case where you would use either, well, you use BB shells here. Definitely recommend using our dental mark. They're stick-on blebs that glass boron beads. They're smaller. They work better with our software in the sense of aligning. And we would place those on the outer surfaces of the impression tray. So what we're going to look at is the exact protocol. If you need more information on this, I can get you the link to his video or copies of the slides as needed. You want to start off with getting an impression tray and loading up the markers on the outside. Make sure the markers are out of any scatter lines, because otherwise they'll be obliterated in the CT scan. Load it with an alginate and take an impression, and then scan the patient when the impression is set. And the patient has to be wearing the tray or the impression tray comfortably but properly. In all of our scans, we recommend a decent bite block to separate the arches so that the software can be used properly during alignment. After the scan happens to be taken, then you pour up a model in the impression, and when set, do another CT scan. This time, only the model and the impression tray. Afterwards, separate the model, and you're going to do a CT scan. I'm sorry, an optical scan of the model. So the full procedure is taking a scan of the patient with the scan appliance and import that into the software. then do a CT scan of the model with the scan appliance or the impression tray, and you'll be merging these two scans together, the scan appliance by way of the blebs or the markers to the patient scans by way of the markers. So we're now marking off or matching up marker to marker because we don't have a way of using the patient's teeth as markers. So the next step is to import the model, the STL of the model, and that's going to be lined up against the patient's, I should say, to the model, the CT scan model. And after that's done, then you have a surface, a sure surface that you can draw your curve on to create the surgical guide. So we're using Blue Sky Bioparts, so we can use normal mode. And as normal mode, what we need for that is really use of our drills and the X-Cube handpiece. Again, we say preferable because it reduces any changes that would be necessary in the software by using a different handpiece. The differences from this to the other cases is that here we need, as we mentioned before, CT scan of the patient wearing the scan appliance with the radiographic markers. We need a CT scan of the appliance of with the stone model again, wearing that impression tray. And the next thing would be just an optical scan like we needed in the other methods as well. Again, go through this a little bit quicker since it's reinforcing. Good to know, but this is what we've seen before, and this is all done the same way. You import the patient scan, treatment plan, and this time you're going to import a scan appliance because that's imports DICOMs. You select your DICOMs and you see a four-way window where the CT scan is showing in the upper left and the upper right. We have a more refined model showing our radiographic beads in across the top. If you don't see that on your scan, if you ever do it this method, what you need to do is adjust the sliders on the bottom to create the proper density to be able to see the beads very nicely. You then hold the shift key down and click on the corresponding bead points, radiographic marker points, and create the merge and check your positioning. If you have any good virgin teeth, you can check the hints along those teeth, but you know they're aligned because of the radiographic markers. You're ready. You're going to import a different scan. You're going to go to File, Import STL Model, and this time, well, the software will want to align it to the CT scan by default, but we're going to hit Cancel, and then you're going to go click Align to Model, and then you can pick the model that you're going to align it to. And you'll be able to line up model to model. One's a CT scan of the model, the other is the optical scan, and we want the optical scan there so to produce the proper surgical guide, as we'll see. Here, again, just as a refresher, how you can manipulate the model if need be. And as far as excuse me, checking the merge, best way in this particular case is by going to the surfaces and turn on both hints for our models and verify how well aligned they are to each other. And that will be a great indication as to how accurate the case will be. We're ready to draw our curve around our guide or around our model. So we just make sure that that model is visible in the surfaces panel. And here's with the 3D view maximized, you would go to the guide panel and draw your curve around the arch or quadrant or whatever, however you want to limit. And again, that's done by holding the Shift key down and dragging. You would then go to edit your curve, making sure that none of the lines are crossed. They have to be corrected, and see how far you want to go with your positioning. You can reposition the limits of the surgical guide here as well. We're in normal mode, and we have to decide if we're using or determine whether we're using our X-cube handpiece, or if not, just plug in the drills if it hasn't been done before, the drill lengths for the other handpieces. Okay, we've created the guide. You can see the guide sitting on top of the model, and a new surface has been created, color-coded as needed. And here's an indication of the images of the top and bottom of or view of the surgical guide. We're now going to save the surgical guide. And again, remember, we mentioned that in saving or clicking export, it's going to export in normal mode just the surgical guide. And you would, of course, check the positioning or the location of where you want to save the data. Our guide report, since we're using Blue Sky Bio parts, we can rely on these numbers. As it was automatically calculated within the software. We go to add parts to cart, and once again in the cart you can select items as necessary, and once again you can create or smooth out the surfaces, add a label, or change the drill stop orientation. Yeah, I'll leave this up on the screen in case you want to jot down any phone numbers. Contact these guys. They do really fantastic work, and they're great to work with. Again, same prices. Nothing has changed, regardless of the methodology. The only thing that would actually affect this would be how many sites. And with all this, we do have other methodologies. Of course, we mentioned one-on-one. You can call, email, any questions that you might have. If you want additional training, you can call to schedule. You can visit us on Facebook. We have a pretty enhanced channel on YouTube that has a lot of videos and a lot of good material in that. As far as Dental Town, you can see us under the $50 surgical guide. There are live courses available around the country. You can check these, with Cadre, implant seminars, live implant seminars. Some even have live surgeries. I'm just repeating my contact information. If you need any more individualized training or support, feel free to call me. If you haven't copied, my number's already in the chat, as well as my email address. Just repeating special offers. These two slides are, either or for new customers, or the other slide is an option for new customers. And of course, your free STLs are completely different and a different offer altogether. And you can still take advantage of one of the others even if you take advantage of the STLs. But here, any one of our kits, our surgical kits, the packages, whether there's a motor involved or more implants, depending. Just as long as you put in Cyber Monday STL attendee, you'll get $1,000 off any starter package. Other customers can take advantage of this by taking $500 off of any $1,000 or more order. And again, put in Cyber Monday STL attendee in the instructions. And again, mention the free STL exports. Just want to reiterate that this is for everybody who's attended, regardless of if you take advantage of the other options as far as the other sales. If you're not sure how to do this, just go into the help menu, register license, and just copy the long code to an email. Just highlight it and paste it into an email. Send it to either plan@blueskybio.com or to mine, lmalkin@blueskybio.com, and I'll get your license as quickly as I can. So just want to say thank you guys for attending. It's been great. And again, if you have any questions whatsoever, don't hesitate to contact me. And wish you all the best of luck. And also happy holidays. Alrighty. Take care.